So, das ist schwierig, jetzt nach so einem Kölschen Jungen weiter.
Well, it's quite difficult to find a connection, a serious connection to this humorous program, but that's what we're here for, ladies and gentlemen. I have now brought together our practical panel here in a very well-mixed setup. We have with us Götz Nordbruch from the UFUG Association in Berlin, Melanie Blinzler from the Crime Prevention Council of the City of Oldenburg, and Maarten van den Donk representing the Radicalization Awareness Network. We will hear more about what that is in a minute. And Rita Salgmann of the Committee on Police and Crime Prevention, Lower Saxony. That represents the entire bandwidth of prevention work, and we will see now how we can give you a cross-sectional view about the new challenges in practical prevention work. First of all, I would like to give the mic to Ms. Blinzler because she has the great advantage of being able to work professionally as the director of the Crime Prevention Council of the City of Oldenburg, and I would like to know what the advantages are of actually being employed in crime prevention. The first point is time. There is time that you can spend on prevention work. You mustn't underestimate that. The second point is cooperation that you can build up because you have this time. And on a municipal level, that wouldn't even work in prevention work, and it only works the way we're doing it in Oldenburg together with volunteers. Mr. van den Donk, I will now jump from the municipal level to the European level. The EU Commission has understood that prevention work is important, and with your network, you form a sort of hinge between the politics and a practical level. That is true. We integrate the practical level and the political level Europe-wide, but we also help the practitioners from the member states to network because they are very experienced in radicalization, extremism work, etc., and their experience can be useful to other states. And what we try to do as Radicalization Awareness Network is to find good practices, best practice examples, and making them public and trying to support networking between the member states. Mr. Nordbruch, your association UFUG is based in Berlin, and you mainly work with immigrants, and you work in the field of Islam, Islamization, extremism in this field. What are the implications of the political debates on your work that are taking place at the moment? We just heard from Mr. van den Donk that there is more awareness and that their network is trying to form a hinge between politics and practice. What is your situation like? Where are you involved and who listens to you? Well, for us, political debate is a central issue, and our impression is that the offers that we make for young people, the empowerment that we're trying to achieve, can only work if the social context allows for that. So if young people really feel that with all their differences, they can actually participate in the society, only then prevention makes sense. And if the political discourse does not reflect that and young people hit glass ceilings time and again, it's frustrating for the young people, and prevention work meets its limits quite soon. Our association UFUG was established 10 years ago, and we chose this name. It's Arabic, it's Turkish, it means horizon. And in 2007, our idea was to leave behind the debate whether Islam is part of the German society. But 10 years later, the discussion has re-emerged, and just to get back to the interview Ms. Merkel gave at the TV show Anne Will last night, it was really disillusioning, and a goal of prevention work is to initiate political discussion and political debate. It's not enough to do social work in the school, but we have to change the entire society, otherwise it's just a drop in the ocean. And there are no programs that are ever finished and complete, and that is a big problem when you speak to the political level. It's very difficult to present any finalized results or any boxes you can tick, successes that you can hold up. Ms. Salgmann, you have a very clearly defined field of work, and you say very confidently that your prevention work is successful. Why is that so? It is successful because we can see the changes that have taken place. But just to get back to what was said before, Mr. Nordbruch already mentioned awareness raising. In the police, we are able to see what the situation is with crime at the moment, how radicalization processes take place, because we take home this insight from our daily work, from our investigation work, our work on the streets. And therefore, we are also partners when it comes to establish prevention in the municipalities and to raise awareness on that level. It is not only an issue for the major cities, but also for smaller and medium-sized cities. And it's necessary to invest in this, because this is where city council resolutions are needed and where jobs are needed that have to be financed by the public, by public funds, because we want to work professionally and we want to have professional workers. And that is why we can say in an absolutely justified way that that our expertise is required to work together with the stakeholders on site to raise awareness and to make prevention work possible. When it comes to success, of course, we see and we have seen in the past 10 to 15 years that there were successes. I think it is now commonly known that the readiness to exercise violence has been reduced thanks to joint efforts, and that does not only refer to statistics in the bright field but also in the dark field. But on the other hand, there are escalating excesses of violence that we've never seen before. For example, terrorist attacks on tourists that present new challenges to us. Yeah, and not to forget hate speech issues that Professor Frevert mentioned. These are new developments that you have to get used to, and developments that also lead to consequences. And now I will ask the people standing to my right the consequences for society. This readiness to send hate mail, the perceived humiliation that Professor Frevert mentioned, and Mr. Bayer in his report for this Prevention Congress, who says that humiliation and personal injury are the basis for radicalization. How can this be buffered? How can this be counteracted? And how can such attacks be prevented? I think that resilience plays an important part here, and I also think that this is very difficult. A lot of primary prevention is that against radicalization, or is that prevention of violence, or is a prevention in the sense that people actually finish school. So resilience is something that has nothing to do with education about how democracy works. Resilience means that people experience democracy, that not only knowing it, because most people know how that works, but they don't really live democracy, and that's the problem. There are many programs, not only in the field of radicalization, but also in other areas, and I think that a broad-based agendas and initiatives are a good thing. For example, football matches are not a good initiative against radicalization. They are a good measure to build trust and to make the kids ready for their future. Building a broad base is exactly what we are doing on a municipal level and what we can confirm, what we need. And that is why I mentioned the professional work and voluntary work. We have to connect these two fields. There are different fields of responsibility: school, police, other institutions outside of the school, etc. And a municipal prevention council has the task of linking these players together. We know that these links and the network that we are building make it possible to really carry something into the network, and they help the network really buffer tendencies that are happening. And that is the effort that we have to make, because these networks can create synergies. So one thing is to say that we need a broad base of initiatives, but another thing is that we have to make sure that we stick to our red thread, for example, resilience and expanding protective factors by network activities. With our association, we mainly work in civic education, and for us that is a very important point. Conflict and arguments have to be normal in a pluralist society, and young people have to be enabled to handle such conflicts of interests. Our association is based in Berlin, and in Berlin we have the debate about a law whether teachers will be allowed to wear a headscarf or not. And this debate, for me, is an example for conflict in a pluralist society. Conflicts that arise necessarily. This is a clash of the claim of neutrality and the right to exercise religion freely, and there is no simple answer to that. We have to find a compromise. This is highly explosive, and at the same time we have to say that this is an example for how democratic processes of understanding are created, because this is a real debate about different interests, and it doesn't mean that one side will carry the victory and the other side will lose, but this is democracy, this is pluralism. And instead of polarizing such debates, which is happening in Berlin because both camps are depreciating each other again, this is part of a democratic process that can be used as a civic education initiative. And from my point of view, this would be good to counteract this depreciation and to create acceptance for the rules of democracy among young people. This is what has been done a lot in many prevention initiatives, but are such initiatives also available for something and not only against things? That is a debate that is taking place in these initiatives. Where do you put your focus? But prevention also means going back one step further, going back to the family situation, and reaching those who are not already Catholic, for example, and who are not already in these programs voluntarily, or who are not already exiting extreme organizations. What do you have to say about that? I think programs and initiatives are one thing, but I think we all agree that we need a basic education for social competences that allow us to make such compromises, to negotiate such compromises, and to act in a democratic way. So universal prevention work is required, which creates resilient children who can resist and who are strong against, for example, the drug scene, against addiction, violence, and extremism. And we know from science and research that the trajectories can be coincidental when it comes to where the children end up, whether they start a drug career or whether they commit petty crime or whether they actually radicalize towards a political or a religious extreme. And that is what these programs are needed for. These programs should be a matter of course in the schools. It should be like learning how to read and write at school, because only there coexistence and cooperation can be taught. And in our country, we have municipalities where there is only one 10-year-old child. And where would this child learn how to negotiate a compromise with children of the same age group? And where can they learn that? In school. So the school is a central place of learning, not only for maths and German, but also for social competences. That is another keyword, proactive social work. Miss Blinzler, can you share your experience from Oldenburg with us? Yes, but I wouldn't say anything about the proactive social work, but rather about fire protection, fire prevention. I would like to add to what Ms. Salgmann said. It's about providing offers for children and young people, and we know a lot more now about what they need and where we should tackle them. And from the point of view of a municipality, it is true that we also have to turn towards the adults, because that is where responsibility lies. And our favorite term in this sense is that of responsibility. Precisely by linking certain players and involving citizens, we want to get beyond thinking in responsibilities. The result has to be that we all feel responsible. So from a municipal point of view, we have to broaden the scope to adults, for example, when it comes to civil courage, or a working group on religions where the representatives from 11 religious communities get together and think about what they can contribute. And all of that is civic commitment and participation. I think what is very important in this respect is the report that mentions the African proverb, "It takes a whole village to raise a child." Often when we create these networks, we only target people who are easy to integrate into the network. For example, we have the prejudice of that you can't talk to Turkish parents because they are members of a different religion. And I think it's very important to focus on polarization. We are a polarized society. There are many villages in the village that raises the child, and we should look at the people who have access to the children and how they can be integrated into the prevention work. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Marx is giving me signs here. With this panel, we wanted to raise your appetite for the forums that are planned for the afternoon and tomorrow, the lectures that you can hear there, and I hope we were able to give you an idea about what it's going to be about. And I would like to thank the panel on the floor and say goodbye to you.